Welcome to Night's Embrace. Tonight we wander through the depths of Hollow Night, into the quiet ruins of Hallownest, a kingdom shaped by dreams, devotion, and decay. This is a story of gods and kings, of light and shadow, and of a small traveler who carries the weight of an entire civilization's memory. Before we begin, a gentle warning. This video contains major spoilers for Hollow Knight and its multiple endings. While I have done my best to keep this retelling faithful to official lore, some parts of the story remain uncertain, open to interpretation, or shrouded in mystery. Where the line between truth and theory blurs, I will tread carefully, always aiming to stay as close to canon as possible. If you enjoy this quiet journey through forgotten worlds, please consider subscribing to the channel. Only about 6% of the people who watch these stories are currently subscribed, yet every new listener helps this channel continue and grow. Your support truly makes a difference. Now, find a comfortable place to rest. Let the noise of the world fade for a while, and join me as we descend into the story of Hollow Knight. Part 1. The Ancient Past before Hallownest. The Wyrm's arrival. Long before the kingdom of Hallownest existed, the land was inhabited by various tribes of bugs, mantises, spiders, moths, mushrooms, and others, each with their own societies and cultures. Into this world came a creature known as a Wyrm, traveling across distant mountains and wastelands until it reached this particular corner of the world. Wyrms were ancient, incredibly long creatures with little to no limbs. They possessed a unique ability, prescience, or foresight, the capacity to see future events to some degree. Despite this power, the Wyrm species had gone extinct by the time of Hollow Knight's events, suggesting their foresight was limited or flawed. When this particular Wyrm arrived in what would become Hallownest, it died. Its massive carcass can still be found in the kingdom's edge. However, this death was not an ending, but a transformation. Inside the Wyrm's maw lay a pale, broken egg, from which emerged a new form, a being of smaller stature but immense power, later known as the Pale King. Higher beings and pale beings. The Pale King belonged to a category of creatures called higher beings, entities that existed above all other life forms. Among higher beings, there appeared to be an even more powerful subset called pale beings. The Pale King's body shone with a radiant presence that could harm those who looked directly upon him. Wyrms possessed an innate drive. They pulled bugs into their service, forming kingdoms and civilizations that would last for ages. The Pale King emerged from his former body with this same purpose, to build an eternal kingdom. The pre-existing tribes. The Mantis tribe. The mantises of the fungal wastes maintained a rich cultural history predating Hallownest. They valued physical strength and territorial independence. Led by 4 mantis lords, they were fierce warriors who respected power. Though they had no interest in joining Hallownest, they negotiated a truce in exchange for maintaining their independence. The Mantis tribe would prevent the creatures of Deepnest from invading Hallownest borders. The mushrooms. The fungal beings of the fungal wastes operated through a shared consciousness, one collective mind linking all mushrooms together. They were proud of this mental connection and viewed it as superior to individual thought. The mushrooms cautiously accepted the Pale King's rule, seeing his foresight as protection against future dangers. Deepnest. The spiders of Deepnest maintained a monarchy, though little is known about their specific governance. Within Deepnest also lived the Weavers, a separate group of spiders who had immigrated there in the past. The Weavers developed their own distinct culture, using silk looms to weave stories, spells, and shields. Deepnest as a whole strongly resisted integration with Hallownest, maintaining isolation from the Pale King's influence. Green Path and the land that became Green Path was created by a higher being named a massive slug-like creature. Used her powerful mind to dream the vegetation of Green Path into existence within previously barren caverns. The Moskin, followers and creations, were literally born from her dreams. At its height, Green Path was much larger than seen in the game, extending into what later became the Queen's Gardens and possibly Fog Canyon. The Moskin built a temple at the Lake of and maintained Moss Knights as defenders, demonstrating their society's development. When the Pale King arrived, the law of remained in effect, though the Moskin allowed construction of a road through their territory, the path known as Green Path. The Hive. The bees chose isolation, sealing their hive from the outside world. Only patrol bees could enter and exit. They played little role in Hallownest's greater story. The Moth Tribe and the Radiance. The Moths were a pacifist people, with few ever choosing to take up weapons. They inhabited the resting grounds and possibly the Crystal Peak. The Moth race was born from a higher being known as the Radiance, a being of light that the moths literally basked in, treating her like a living lamp. The Radiance had deep connections to dreams and a substance called essence, the remnants of wishes and dreams that could take physical form. The Radiance appeared to be made of essence itself, though other higher beings also produced essence in various colors. The Radiance was the primary deity associated with the dream realm. When the Pale King arrived, the Moth Tribe made a fateful decision. They completely forsook the Radiance to worship the Pale King's light instead. With her tribe abandoning her, the Radiance became a forgotten memory, fading into obscurity. Part 2. The Rise of Hallownest. The Gift of Higher Thought. The Pale King's kingdom offered something unique to the bugs who entered it. Higher thought. The wastelands beyond Hallownest were inhabited by creatures surviving purely on instinct, without complex reasoning or self-awareness. Hallownest itself functioned as sacred ground that elevated the intelligence of those dwelling within its borders. This transformation is demonstrated by comparing two characters of the same species, Tuk, who lives beneath a capital city and speaks clearly, versus Boone, who lives outside Hallownest and can barely string words together. The Pale King somehow changed the fundamental nature of bugs, taming their savage instincts and granting them consciousness. Citizens of Hallownest believed the Pale King created the world and everything in it. Shrines to the king appeared throughout the kingdom, and king's idols were distributed to his followers. The White Lady. The Pale King did not rule alone. Another higher being, also classified as a pale being, shared power with him, the White Lady. This root-like entity would eventually reside in the Queen's Gardens, though little is known about her origins or nature. What is documented is her role as the Pale King's partner and her capacity for reproduction. Building the kingdom. Infrastructure. The Pale King ordered construction of an extensive transportation network. Stagways carried passengers and goods throughout the kingdom. The forgotten crossroads and storerooms above the City of Tears served as storage facilities for these routes. Tramways were also constructed. One tram connected the forgotten crossroads to the resting grounds. A second ran from Kingdom's Edge across the ancient basin to Deepnest. A third tram construction began within Deepnest itself, but workers were killed by Deepnest inhabitants who rejected this intrusion, highlighting the continuing tension between the two territories. Regular pathways connected different areas, maintained by an elite group known as the Mender Bugs, who dedicated themselves to repairing signs and posts throughout Hallownest. Crystal Peak. The Crystal Peak contained rapidly growing crystals that formed on walls, ceilings, and even bug shells. These crystals were valuable to Hallownest's citizens, leading to large-scale mining operations. The crystals could contain energy and were said to sing if one listened carefully. The capital city. At Hallownest's heart stood the capital city, later known as the City of Tears, though this name only applied after the kingdom's collapse, when water from the blue lake above began raining down upon it. The city represented the pinnacle of Hallownest's civilization. Beneath the capital, hidden from most citizens, the Pale King built his white palace in an area called the Ancient Basin. This separation kept the king distant from his subjects, possibly to hide his relatively small stature compared to the grand statues erected in his image. The 5 Great Knights. Hallownest's primary military force consisted of 5 elite warriors: Wyrm, Hegemol, Zema, Isma, and Drya. Wyrm displayed unwavering loyalty to the Pale King. Hegemol was known for humor, a soft-spoken voice, and impressive size. Zema came from a distant serene land, bringing delicate flowers with her. She formed a relationship with a daughter of one of the Mantis Lords. Isma was described as kind and appeared to be some form of plant-based life. Drya was fierce, caring, and wise. These knights participated in significant events called the Champion's Call, the Knotted Grove, and the Battle of the Black Wyrm, though details of these conflicts are lost to history. The Colosseum of Fools. Carved from the corpse of an ancient bug, this arena attracted warriors from beyond Hallownest who sought glory in combat. A figure known as the Lord Fool oversaw the battles. The Pale Lurker, one of the Pale King's servants, became a champion here, possibly indicating royal approval of the Colosseum. The Royal Waterways. This area processed the kingdom's waste, washing it out into the fungal wastes. Here arose the flukes, parasitic creatures spawned from the fluke mom, a large creature that housed numerous smaller flukes within her body. Cultural elements. Certain powers became taboo in Hallownest. Lifeblood, a blue liquid substance that refreshed those who drank it, was considered heretical. Users were demonized, though it's unclear if the Pale King directly instituted this prohibition. Soul magic. Soul, the life force animating living creatures, could be controlled by some to conjure powerful attacks. Despite its potency, most citizens shunned combat applications of soul magic. The society that emerged was sophisticated, but, as some observed, had grown weak. Bugs no longer hunted for food and had become complacent. The wealthy elite in the capital's East Wing grew obsessed with riches, becoming cowardly and indulgent. Part 3. The Radiance's Return. The infection begins. The Moth Tribe's abandonment of the Radiance was not absolute. Memories lingered, and hushed whispers of faith kept her existence alive. At the summit of Crystal Peak, known as Hallownest's Crown, stood the last shrine to the Radiance, maintained to preserve her memory. The Radiance's light began appearing in the dreams of Hallownest citizens. This light manifested as an infection that spread through the kingdom. Infected bugs fell into deep sleep and awoke with shattered minds. Some attempted to resist, which only consumed them more completely. Effects of the infection: loss of will and individual thought, aggressive behavior toward uninfected bugs, physical transformation, bloating, and orange cyst development, reversion to basic instincts, mindlessly performing former duties. Connection to the Radiance's hive mind, allowing her to control infected bodies. Responses to the crisis. The City of Tears. Gates were sealed to prevent infection from reaching the capital. Stagways shut down, and most stags died. The Soul Sanctum. Scholars of the Soul Sanctum decided to harness soul power to fight the infection. They killed hundreds of bugs, extracting their souls and injecting them into their own bodies. Their goal was achieving pure focus that would protect them from mental plagues. The Soul Master, their leader, went mad from the concentrated soul power. The entire sect ultimately failed to avoid infection, having killed countless innocents in their futile attempt. The Mantis Tribe. The mantises, possessing stronger will than common bugs, successfully resisted the infection. However, one of the 4 Mantis Lords betrayed his sisters. This traitor lord and his followers willingly accepted infection as it granted increased strength and courage. They were exiled from the Mantis village and eventually settled in the Queen's Gardens. The traitor lord's daughter, the same Mantis, in a relationship with Zemma, died at some point, with her union rejected by the Mantis tribe due to Zemma's status as an outsider. The 5 Great Knights. The knights proved ineffective against the infection, unable to combat an enemy that attacked through dreams and minds rather than physical force. Part 4. The Pale King's Plan. Discovery of the Void. At the bottom of the ancient basin lay an entrance to a massive pit called the Abyss. Within the Abyss existed a lake of a dark substance known as Void. The Pale King discovered that this void could be given form. Evidence suggested an ancient civilization predating Hallownest had already achieved this, leaving an imprint deep within the Abyss. The Pale King established a workshop in his palace, where he placed Void inside armor shells imbued with soul, creating servants called King's Molds and Wing Molds. These Void constructs were imprinted with the Pale King's will, ensuring their loyalty. The Vessel Plan. The Pale King theorized he could create a being capable of containing the Radiance, a pure vessel. The infection required a host with will and mind to enslave. A pure vessel would be a creature made of void, designed to lack both qualities, empty and hollow, incapable of being infected. The creation process. The Pale King and White Lady engaged in a union that produced numerous eggs. These eggs were cast down into the abyss, where void seeped into them, corrupting the offspring of the 2 higher beings. This process created the vessels shells born from the Pale King and White Lady, filled with void. Vessels were not considered truly alive. Each contained a shade, a being of pure void, hidden behind the vessel's face. Vessels possessed no gender, being empty constructs rather than living creatures in the traditional sense. Selection of the Hollow Knight. Thousands of vessels were created, but only one was chosen as the pure vessel. The selected vessel became known as the Hollow Knight and was taken to the White Palace. The selection method. The exact selection process remains debated. The most supported theory suggests the vessels hatched at the bottom of the abyss, and the first to climb to the top was chosen. Evidence includes a lore tablet stating our pure vessel has ascended, a memory showing vessels falling from above back into the pit, possibly while attempting to escape rather than being cast down. The fact that making it to the top first would demonstrate strength and determination. However, this raises questions about what made the Hollow Knight more pure than others, since all vessels were created identically. Some theories suggest the Pale King may have evaluated multiple successful climbers, while others propose no vessel was inherently more hollow than another. the Pale King simply needed one functional vessel and took the first to succeed. Sealing the Abyss. After selecting the Hollow Knight, the Pale King sealed the entrance to the Abyss, leaving the discarded vessels to decay in darkness. Both the Pale King and White Lady expressed shame over this act, but saw no alternative to save the kingdom. One of the Pale King's royal retainers was sealed inside a lighthouse built atop a spire in the abyss, tasked with keeping the light burning over the void sea below. This loyal servant accepted imprisonment in darkness to fulfill this single duty. Training the Hollow Knight. The selected vessel was raised and trained, growing to several times its original size. It learned to wield a nail sword, though the purpose of this combat training remains unclear, possibly for self-defense against potential intruders, or perhaps the training related to the mechanics of containing the Radiance. The Three Dreamers. The Pale King determined that additional seals were necessary to protect the Hollow Knight's physical body while the Radiance remained trapped inside. He recruited 3 individuals who would become known as the Dreamers. Lurien the Watcher. Living in the Watcher's spire in the City of Tears, Lurien observed the city through his telescope. A devoted follower of the king, he required little convincing to participate in the plan. Lurien may have been connected to the Tower of Love and the Collector, a naked void construct that obsessively captured creatures in jars, possibly attempting to preserve them from infection. Monoman the Teacher. Residing in the Teacher's archives built atop an acid lake in Fog Canyon, Monoman possessed a tentacled lower body. The archives used advanced technology to store information about Hallownest. Monoman had detailed knowledge of the Pale King's plan to defeat the Radiance. She was likely connected to the jellyfish-like creatures filling Fog Canyon. Hera the Beast. The Queen of Deepnest. Hera required convincing to join the plan. Relations between Hallownest and Deepnest remained strained. Hera agreed to become a dreamer in exchange for a child. The Pale King agreed to this bargain, and the two conceived a child together. The White Lady consented to this arrangement. The King of Deepnest appeared to be dead at this point, and Hera may have desired offspring of high birth, being a common bug herself. This union produced Hornet, who became known as the Gendered Child. Unlike the Pale King's other children, she was not hollowed out by the void in the abyss. Establishing the seals. The 3 dreamers were put into eternal sleep, creating a seal over the black egg that would house the Hollow Knight. Each dreamer received protection. Watcher Knights guarded Lurien's chamber. A giant jellyfish named Umu protected Monomon. Monomon also gave her servant Quirrell a mask required to break an additional seal. Hera's protector is never seen in-game, suggesting either absence or failure. The Weaver's contribution. The Weavers of Deepnest created a seal of binding from silk, featuring the Hollow Knight's head prominently. This seal appears in the White Palace and blocks the exit during the final confrontation with the Hollow Knight. Silk spools from the Weavers can be found in stag stations near both Deepnest and the White Palace, as well as in the Pale King's workshop. The Weavers' involvement was likely part of the agreement between the Pale King and Hera. The sealing. When the Hollow Knight was ready, the Radiance was channeled into the vessel, though the exact mechanism of this process is never explained. The Hollow Knight was placed inside a giant black egg in the Forgotten Crossroads. This egg, fashioned from void, was designed to sustain the vessel indefinitely. The Hollow Knight was chained within, and the entrance was sealed by the 3 dreamers' power. Initially, this plan succeeded. The infection was contained. Memorials to the Hollow Knight and the Dreamers were erected in the City of Tears and the Resting Grounds. Part 5. The Kingdom's Collapse. The flaw in the plan. The timeline of how long the seal held is unclear. Citizens once visited the Temple of the Black Egg to pray, feeling peace within its walls. Eventually they stopped coming, possibly indicating the infection beginning to leak once more. The truth was that the Pale King's pure vessel was not pure at all. The Hollow Knight had been tainted by an idea instilled within it. A memory, hidden in the White Palace, shows the Hollow Knight and Pale King sharing a moment together. The vessel may have developed a parental bond with its creator. This single emotion, this fragment of will, created an opening for the Radiance. The mushroom's fate. The giant mushroom in the fungal core died, its final thoughts recorded. Pale Wyrm. What good to foresee a demise unavoidable? This suggests the Pale King may have always known his kingdom was doomed. He could only delay the inevitable. The mushroom's shared mind, which they had trusted in the Pale King to protect, ultimately failed them. The Pale King's final plan. When it became clear the Hollow Knight could not permanently contain the Radiance, the Pale King enacted a final retreat. He hid himself, his White Palace, and his court in the Dream Realm. The palace was prepared as if for a long absence, furniture covered with white sheets, the entire structure protected by thorns and buzzsaws. The king's death. The Pale King eventually died while sitting on his throne in the White Palace. The cause remains unknown, though several details are noteworthy. The throne room is unusually dark compared to the rest of the palace. Particle effects and ambient sound match those of the abyss. All king's molds surrounding the throne are dead. Void presence has spread through the ancient basin, reaching as high as the ruined elevator shaft to the city. The lighthouse in the abyss was turned off. The void itself may have influenced the royal retainer to betray his duty and extinguish the lighthouse. Whether the void played a direct role in the Pale King's death remains speculative. The evidence is circumstantial. The capital's downfall. With gates sealed and the infection still present, conditions in the City of Tears deteriorated. Some bugs resorted to cannibalism to avoid starvation. The Soul Sanctum's experiments left hundreds of corpses. Eventually, only one citizen remained, Eternal Emilitia, who laughs endlessly like a hollow shell. Fates of the Great Knights. The White Lady. She retreated to a cocoon deep in the Queen's gardens, placing bindings on herself to prevent spreading her seed further. She claimed this was due to shame over creating the vessels, though she also diminished her power, possibly to hide from unwanted visitors. Dryar stood guard outside the White Lady's cocoon, protecting her queen from the traitor mantises. She was eventually killed by these enemies. Hegemor possessed the city crest, a key to the City of Tears gates. At some point, a maggot stole Hegemor's armored shell. Maggots were generally weak and discriminated against, forced into menial labor. This particular maggot took Hegemor's armor to defend his oppressed brothers, an act of revolution rather than infection-driven madness. Ogrim Dung Defender moved to the royal waterways, living among excrement and changing his name to Dung Defender. Despite the degrading environment, he maintained unwavering loyalty to the king and love for his fellow knights, even creating monuments to them from dung. He defended the pipeways and Isma's grove. Isma, a section of the royal waterways filled with acid, with Isma's corpse at its center, overgrown with plant life. Isma likely caused this acid manifestation, but circumstances of her death remain unknown. Other changes throughout Hallownest. Ornate departed Deep Mist during this period, not returning until the game's events, she eventually took up the role of guarding Hallownest from intruding warriors and protecting the cast-off shell in Kingdom's Edge. Green Path. The Moskin awaited Un's call to return to the dream from which they were born. However, Un's strength deteriorated for unknown reasons, possibly due to the White Lady claiming part of her territory, or perhaps the infection itself. While Uns was calling to her children, many Moskin could no longer hear her. Instead, many took the infection into themselves, causing Green Path to become overgrown. Despite Un's weakening, some Moskin, called mossy vagabonds, openly chose to worship the Radiance instead of Un. The hive fell to infection after the death of Hive Queen Vesper. However, the bees adapted relatively well. Their society already operated under a collective consciousness similar to the Radiance's hive mind, making the transition less disruptive. The moths. The entire moth tribe died out, except for one survivor, the seer. She continued tending graves in the resting grounds, while awaiting the arrival of a prophesied figure called the Wielder. Kingdom's Edge. The land became covered in ash from the decomposing Wyrm corpse. The Colosseum of Fools continued operating. The Lord Fool died, but no one noticed or cared. Warriors in the Colosseum became infected, but maintained control over themselves, possibly having accepted infection willingly for combat advantages, similar to the Traitor Lord's followers. The Pale Lurker. The Pale King's former champion went insane. Escaped vessels. Despite the abyss being sealed, some vessels escaped. Corpses can be found throughout the kingdom, in the ancient basin, Green Path, and several in Nosk's lair in Deepnest. The vessels likely slipped into Deepnest through old passageways, evidenced by void influence in parts of Deepnest. One escaped vessel is the player character known as the Knight. Outside visitors. All entrances to Hallownest were eventually closed, except the old well in Dirtmouth. Nevertheless, several outsiders entered the kingdom. Relic Seeker Lem came to pillage artifacts from the ruined kingdom. The Grim Troop sent an advanced scout whose corpse can be found in Howling Cliffs. This bug's purpose was to locate Hallownest so the troop could be summoned later. The Grim Troop serves a higher being called the Nightmare Heart, feeding on the nightmares of fallen kingdoms to keep the heart alive, a process involving the troop master sacrificing his own child. The God-Seekers traveled from the land of storms after being abandoned by their old gods, the gods of thunder and rain. They created devices called God Tuners to detect divine power, which led them to sense the Pale King's lingering presence and find Hallownest. Upon arrival, the Godseeker was forced into hibernation inside a sarcophagus-like cocoon that was then chained shut. This cocoon ended up in the junk pit in the royal waterways, likely placed there by the Dung Defender who guards that area. Part 6. The Tonight's Arrival. A new visitor. Around the time Quirrell returned to Hallownest, as shown in the prequel comic, the Radiance erupted from the Hollow Knight with enough force to crack its shell, releasing a powerful roar. The infection leaking from the temple intensified, reanimating corpses throughout the kingdom. This event prompted the Weavers to depart Hallownest, possibly returning to their original home, which may be Farloom, the setting of Hollow Knight. Silksong. The night one of the escaped vessels was called back to Hallownest, possibly by the sealed Hollow Knight or the Radiance within. The Knight enters through the well in Dirtmouth, and the game begins. Hornet's tests. Hornet notices the Knight's presence and lures it deep into Green Path for a confrontation. She knows what the Knight intends to do and tests its strength. After the battle, She deems the knight too weak. Later, Hornet appears at the statue of the Hollow Knight in the City of Tears. She notes that the knight has gained resilience from time spent in the void beyond Hallownest. This could refer to how leaving Hallownest causes memory loss, meaning the knight would have no memories of its tragic creation. Hornet tells the knight that if it seeks to continue the stasis keeping Hallownest standing, it must seek the grave in Ash, Kingdom's Edge. At this point, Hornet sees the knight as a possible replacement for the failing Hollow Knight. The Dream Nail. If the knight reaches the resting grounds, the three dreamers appear and cast it into the dream realm. The seer rescues the knight and grants it the Dream Nail, a blade that can tear the veil between the waking world and dreams. With the Dream Nail, the knight can enter the dreams of the three dreamers and defeat them, breaking their seals and unlocking the entrance to the Black Egg Temple. Part 7. The Multiple Endings. Ending 1. Hollow Knight. The knight enters the Black Egg and finds the Hollow Knight chained and waiting. When the chains break, the Hollow Knight roars with the Radiance's voice and attacks. During the fight, the Hollow Knight attempts to harm itself, but the Radiance takes control of its body to continue attacking. After the Hollow Knight is defeated, it spews infection everywhere. The knight focuses the infection into itself, taking the Hollow Knight's place. New chains appear and bind the knight, and a new seal forms over the Black Egg entrance. Key question: can the knight contain the infection indefinitely, or will it eventually fail like the Hollow Knight? The King's Brand. If the knight travels to Kingdom's Edge as Hornet suggested, she challenges it one final time as a test of strength. Upon defeat, she grants access to the cast-off shell where the Pale King was reborn. By interacting with the egg, the knight receives the King's Brand, technically making it the new ruler of Hallownest. With the King's Brand, the knight can open the sealed entrance to the Abyss and discover its birthplace. Hornet's Revelation. When leaving the Abyss, Hornet presents a second option. Instead of merely prolonging the stasis, the knight might be able to face the heart of the infection itself. She sees the knight as a chance for true change, using the void within it to eliminate the Radiance completely, rather than just containing her. The King Soul Charm. After obtaining the Shade Cloak ability in the Abyss, the knight can reach the White Lady in the Queen's Gardens. She has been awaiting a vessel to accept a gift, half of the King Soul Charm, which she claims will grant greater power. The White Lady feels the weakening of the Hollow Knight within her roots. She believes the knight is free of the blemishes that made the Hollow Knight flawed. This suggests the knight might truly be a pure vessel capable of containing the Radiance successfully. The nature of hollowness. However, this interpretation is complicated. Multiple characters and descriptions suggest the knight possesses will and perhaps even mind. The Pale King stated that a pure vessel should have neither. The White Lady's eyes have been clouded by time. She can be fooled by the Defender's crest charm into thinking Wyrm is present, and she believes Drya still lives. Yet she also claims vessels stand out clearly to her as her spawn, and she questions whether the knight sought her aid, implying she recognizes it has will. The Hollow Knight was considered pure, despite being trained to wield a sword. If vessels were truly hollow in a literal sense, they shouldn't be able to walk, draw maps, or perform any actions requiring decision-making. The concept of being hollow appears abstract and difficult to define precisely. The Awakened Dream Nail. To obtain the other half of the King's Soul, the knight must reach the White Palace, which is locked inside a Kingsmold's dream. Accessing it requires an Awakened Dream Nail, achieved by bringing 1800 essence to the seer. When the knight accomplishes this, the seer recognizes it as the wielder her tribe has been dreaming about. The Moth tribe believed the wielder would wash away their crimes of abandoning the Radiance. The seer seems to accept that the knight might kill the Radiance, ready for her tribe to be forgotten forever. The Void Heart. Inside the White Palace, the knight obtains the other half of the King Soul. The complete charm provides unlimited soul regeneration, though it's inefficient due to high charm cost and slow rate. The King Soul symbolizes the union of two higher beings, just as vessels were created by two higher beings uniting. With the King Soul equipped, the knight gains access to the birthplace in the abyss, a massive pile of vessel shells containing a giant egg. Dream nailing this egg shows the knight's memory of being cast into the abyss. Witnessing this memory transforms the King Soul into the Void Heart. The knight comes to terms with the void inside itself, and the fragmented void of the abyss unifies under the knight's will. The shades in the abyss stop attacking, and the creature that granted the shade cloak calls the knight Lord of Shades. The knight has bound the void under its control, gaining unprecedented strength through the union of void, the Pale King's essence and the White Lady's essence. Ending 2. Sealed Siblings. With the Void Heart equipped, 2 new endings become available. Hornet now stands outside the Black Egg, offering to help during the fight with the Hollow Knight. Hornet rushes in, subduing it and piercing its shell. This gives the knight an opportunity to dream nail its sibling and confront the Radiance directly. If the knight instead finishes off the Hollow Knight normally, the sealed siblings ending occurs. It proceeds like the Hollow Knight ending, but Hornet is now sealed inside the temple as well, and her face appears on the Black Egg door. The implications are unclear. Hornet might now function as a dreamer, but since she's inside the temple, no one can reach her to break the seal if the knight begins leaking infection. Additionally, Hornet mentions the bindings would drain her, suggesting she might simply die regardless. Ending 3. Dream no more. If the knight dream nails the Hollow Knight, when Hornet creates the opening, it enters an arena to fight the Radiance directly. The knight isn't alone. Shades from the abyss appear to help corner the Radiance. Eventually, the Radiance becomes trapped in void tendrils. The knight strikes her repeatedly, and the Radiance is consumed by darkness. The Black Egg appears to dissolve into shadows as void seeps into the ground. Hornet awakens to find the knight's broken shell on the floor. A final shot shows the shades in the abyss going to rest. The Radiance is destroyed, and Hallownest is finally free from infection. Unanswered questions. How much of this outcome was planned, if at all? The White Lady was waiting for a vessel. Did she communicate with Hornet? Hornet was guarding the King's brand, the only way for vessels to enter the abyss. How did she know to guard it from weaker vessels? If vessels escape the abyss on their own through deepness passages, why guard the King's brand at all? No explicit plans to produce the Dream No More ending are stated in-game. Whether the White Lady, Hornet, or even the Pale King anticipated creating a Lord of Shades to defeat the Radiance remains speculative. Part 8. The Godmaster Endings. The Godseeker's Ritual. The final 2 endings come from the Godmaster DLC and operate outside the main narrative structure. These endings don't even require entering the Black Egg Temple. If the knight finds the Godseeker in the junk pit and breaks them free, it can enter their mind. Inside this dream space, the knight can refight all the game's bosses. This is part of the Godseeker's ritual. They attune to the resonance of gods through ritual combat, ascending their minds higher until they can achieve communication with the god sleeping at Hallownest's heart, the Radiance. The God-seekers engage in this elaborate religious practice to reach communion with divine beings, attempting to fill their silent minds with godly presence. The Pantheons. As the night progresses through 4 Pantheons' collections of boss fights, the God-seekers draw closer to contacting the Radiance sealed inside the Hollow Knight. At the end of the 4th Pantheon, the Radiance makes herself known in a reunion scene between vessels, but she isn't the only one to respond. The Void itself rises up to meet the Radiance call. The final challenge, the Pantheon of Hallownest, becomes available. The God-seeker finally acknowledges the Knight as more than a simple cringer and watches intently. Ending 4. Embrace the Void. After defeating all bosses in the final Pantheon, the Knight faces the Absolute Radiance, an enhanced, more powerful version of the final boss. This alternate confrontation plays out differently than the standard Dream No More ending. The Knight receives no help from other shades. After defeating the Absolute Radiance, the Knight appears to transform into a massive entity of Void. This creature has several names in the community: the God of Gods, the Lord Shade, the Devourer, the Void Entity. This Void Entity completely annihilates the Radiance. It then descends from the sky back into Godhome, and the God-seeker is pulled into the creature by Void tendrils. The scene cuts to the God-seeker in the junk pit. Void begins leaking from their eyes as the entity apparently escapes back into the real world. The scene shifts to Hornet, standing outside the Black Egg as infection disappears from nearby vines. She hears footsteps from inside the temple. The Hollow Knight emerges, and the two prepare for combat. Implications. The Radiance's death in Godhome actually killed her in reality, ending the infection over Hallownest. With the Radiance dead, the seals on the Black Egg likely dissolved, allowing the Hollow Knight to escape its prison. The Knight has transformed into a raging Void entity that might threaten what remains of Hallownest. This ending is essentially a cliffhanger. The nature of the Void entity raises questions. Did this creature already exist in the Void, or was it created by the God-seeker's focus? Did the Knight transform into it, or become absorbed by it? The statue of this creature grants a hunter's journal entry for an ancient artifact called the Void Idol, possibly implying the ancient civilization worshipped it. Ending 5. Delicate Flower. The delicate flowers that Sema brought from her homeland possess strange power that even deters the White Lady from touching them. If the Knight gives one of these flowers to the God-seeker before completing the Pantheon of Hallownest, an alternate version of the Embrace the Void ending occurs. Instead of Void being released into the world, the flower pulls a reversal. The God-seeker and the Void entity both disappear entirely. The flower emits a pale light, connecting it to pale beings. Sema brought these flowers from a distant land, implying multiple pale beings exist beyond Hallownest. This raises questions about pale ori found throughout the kingdom. Did it come from the Pale King or another pale being? What exactly is it? Part 9. The Greater Mysteries. Unresolved questions. The Godmaster endings appear to set up future content. Hollow Knight, Silk Song, the announced sequel, doesn't seem directly connected to these events on the surface, creating uncertainty about how Team Cherry plans to resolve the Embrace the Void cliffhanger. About pale beings. How many exist beyond the Pale King and White Lady? What properties and powers define them? How do the delicate flowers counter Void About the void, where did it originate? How conscious or intelligent is it? The Shade Law Tablet states the void is powerful but not unified. It can thrash at nearby threats or call out in unison, but it isn't a single conscious being. Can it form complex strategies, or does it only react to immediate stimuli? About the world, how large is the world beyond Hallownest? How powerful are creatures like the void entity and Wyrms compared to other beings? Did the weavers return to Farloom, the setting of Silksong? About Hallownest's history, what was the ancient civilization that predated Hallownest? What were the champions' call, the knotted grove, and the battle of the Black Worm? What exactly were the God-Seekers doing in the Tower of Love? The nature of the narrative, Hollow Knight deliberately leaves many questions unanswered. Having complete answers to every mystery would diminish the world's sense of depth and history. The game presents a world that existed long before the player arrived and will continue after they leave, a living place with countless untold stories. The 5 endings each represent valid interpretations of how Hallownest's story might conclude. Hollow Knight. The cycle continues with a new vessel. Sealed siblings, Hornet, joins in maintaining the seal, for better or worse. Dream no more. The Radiance is destroyed, freeing Hallownest from infection. Embrace the void. A new threat emerges from the solution to the old one. Delicate flower. The threat is neutralized by ancient pale magic. Team Cherry has stated they don't support any single ending as the true conclusion. Each is canonical in its own right, offering different perspectives on sacrifice, duty, and the cost of survival. Conclusion. The history of Hallownest is a chronicle of cycles, civilizations rising and falling, gods being worshipped and forgotten, plans succeeding and failing. The ancient civilization fell before Hallownest. Hallownest rose to glory and collapsed into ruin. The Radiance was forgotten, then remembered. The vessels were sealed away, then one returned. At the center of it all stands the Knight, a being that should not exist, a discarded experiment that escaped its prison, traveled beyond the kingdom's borders, and returned to potentially end the cycle permanently. Whether as a replacement for the Hollow Knight, as the destroyer of the Radiance, or as the Lord of Shades, the Knight represents possibility, the chance that something cast aside as failure might succeed where perfection failed. The Pale King sought to create an eternal kingdom, but eternity proved impossible. His pure vessel was tainted by a single feeling, perhaps love, perhaps merely recognition. His grand plan failed because he tried to create something truly hollow, not understanding that even the smallest crack allows light to enter, or in this case, allows it to escape. Hallownest's story is ultimately about the cost of survival, the weight of duty, and the question of whether any kingdom, any civilization, can truly stand eternal against the entropy of time and memory. The Pale King's foresight showed him the end was inevitable, yet he struggled against it anyway, causing immeasurable suffering in his attempt to delay the unavoidable. In the ruins of his kingdom, among the forgotten graves and darkened stagways, the Knight makes its choice, and in that choice, perhaps Hallownest finds not eternity, but something better, an ending.